We're going to learn with Frank Gambino, a really good art teacher from London, about how to draw hair.
Drawing hair well can transform your portraits and figures, but also this practice is a really good way to build up your skills with values and thinking about structure before detail.
And this time he's drawing someone with lighter hair, which creates more challenges. First, we're just going to go over the basic method with straight hair, and then we're going to get to the main demo, which is drawing the hair tied up. Hi, my name's Kenzo, and this is Love Life Drawing. You start with the overall basic shape. With this hair, there's going to be some dark areas from the shade, and also dark areas from the color of the hair itself in some places. So he starts to draw the shapes of the dark areas that he sees. Then he fills the overall shape with flat mid-tone. And since the hair is quite fair, he uses a lighter mid-tone to fill it. Then he re-establishes the overall structure that he's lost from adding that mid-tone because it's become blurry. Then he looks for highlight areas. Generally, the reflecting light is going to cut across the direction of the strands of the hair, and it can be a bit harder with lighter hair to see these highlights, but you can still see them. Then he adds more dark areas. He's still not thinking about strands, but adding areas of light and dark until he's happy with the light and dark. There's still a lot of mid-tone. You don't want to lose that. So you keep mid-tone areas and then you just add the lightest and the darkest areas. Finally, he adds the dark strands. All those light and dark areas that he established remain in the background, so the head of hair has nice volume. And then he adds light strands with his putty rubber. So the whole process is to put down the mid-tone, add in the areas of light and dark, and then the final icing on the cake is the strands. So now I'm going to hand it over to Frank to go through this process with an extra challenge, which is the tied up hair.
Now we've got hair that's tied up, so there's a little bit more going on. And because Miriam has got brown hair, light hair, as well as dealing with the way that the light hits her hair, we're going to be dealing with the actual light and dark areas of tone that are actually part of the hair as well. So it just gives us another element. So as usual, there's sort of 3 steps where the first step is basically establishing the structure. So now I've established this large area, but you can see that there's a lot going on here. There's lots of different shapes. Now, I wouldn't instantly start doing the mid-tone and then drawing the strands. I need to establish all the other stuff that's going on in her hair. So the other thing I'm seeing, I'm going to give myself a brief understanding as to where the ear is. Here, just roughly, just an idea. And now I start to draw the shapes that I see within the hair. Now some of the shapes that I'm drawing in are the way that she's tied her hair. So Miriam's tied her hair so that it's sort of, we've got this large shape here. But in this area, we've actually got a lighter bit of hair that comes across and also forms a shape. So I'm doing the large area, which is a largish area, not as large as the thing that I started off with, but now all the shapes within that are actually part of the form of the hair. And you can see how much I keep adjusting the drawing, so I'm not establishing anything as definite early on.
So if this was like very complicated plaiting or something,
yeah,
at this point would you put all those shapes in?
This is the bit where I start to do that, yeah. And that's basically what I'm doing, yeah. Good point. So this is where I start to establish all the forms that I see in the hair. And like I said, some of it is actually what she's done with her hair, the way that she's tied her hair back. But some of it is, can you see there's this sort of area that comes through the back of her hair where there's a sort of open bit there which is a little bit darker. I established that shape as well. And there's a sort of area here that's sort of a little bit open as well.
Just from the way it's falling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not to do necessarily with the way that she's tied her hair, but much more to do with just sort of the light and dark tones of her hair. And some of it's to do with the lighting, the way that the lighting is hitting her hair. I'm just going to put a mid-tone going across the whole hair. So I've got a general mid-tone going across all of the hair. that when the light hits the hair, it tends to cut across from the strands, and the dark areas seem to do that as well. So we've got strands coming across here, but the light area is going in that direction. And we've got strands going in this direction on this section, but the dark area and the light area is cutting across. So I start to put that dark area in. So now you'll see that I'm starting to establish all the dark areas that I see on the hair. And some of that is the way that the light hits her hair, and some of that is the way that the light and dark works in her hair anyway. So can you see here there's a darkish area above, which then starts to become lighter here. And up here there's a largish dark area. In the middle so this shape that I drew, which is just the way that the hair, the light and dark in the hair that isn't light. Often the problem is that once you start looking this way, you start to see a little bit too much. So you can only put so much in, and I'm not trying to do like a photorealist version of her hair. I'm just trying to get a sense of the volume of the hair. Anytime I get lost, if this starts to sort of not make sense, I can come back with some structure. So those initial bits of structure that I put in, I'll bring them back. Okay. Oh, and I can see here that there's some darkness as well. Now I'm going to start establishing the light areas. So again, in relation to this thing that I was saying about the way that in whichever direction the strands are going, the light tends to cut across that. I've got a light area coming across here. This section of her hair. So when I put this light area that I see here, I first draw it in. It's useful to draw it in because now I know that that light area is going to work within this space, and I'm not having to sort of just generally sort of put it in and hope I get it in the right place. So this bit is pretty light and then seems to sort of join on with this a little bit. Here the hair is sort of going into her neck but going a little bit more fuzzy. It doesn't need to be as defined. There are areas, say like this light area coming across, this dark bit where it's very defined, so I'll give myself a line to say it works within that space. But where it starts to merge into her neck, I'll keep it relatively sort of formless. Now the ponytail part seems to be one of the lightest, largest areas. So now I can start to take some of that out. So even though I put the mid-tone there, I'm starting to remove it, but it was useful having it there because it gave me a general tone for the rest of the hair. But what I can see as it gets closer to this area, because of these bits, there's a tiny little shadow here. So I'll just put that in. So that gives you a sense that it's going into that little section that she's got there. So you can see I'm starting to build up the form, and now I am actually starting to think about the strands of the hair a little bit, but I'm not going into the strands. I'm just giving myself, again, more tonal areas, but I'm thinking of it in the way that the direction of the hair goes. So this is more or less the final bit where I start to establish the strands of the hair. So I'm not seeing that many sort of like actual strands here. This feels more like a sort of lightish area, but I'll put it in to start off with because I can always knock it back. The main thing is that all that work that you did initially establishing the volume will always stay there in the background when you start to put the strands of the hair in. We'll just give those strands something to sit on and make them feel much more believable, I think. So say I look up here and I sort of say to myself, well, actually there's more of a light area going across. I can still work with that. I can still sort of get rid of the strands that I put in. Make this a little bit darker than it is. Maybe even give myself a little bit of an area that's even lighter. So it looks like I've sort of destroyed it up here, but I can bring those strands back in. And you can see it still fits in. The putty rubber is a very good way of also giving yourself like the idea of the strands of hair. Obviously, it's a lot easier to do this kind of thing with charcoal, and I noticed that people were commenting on that. Can you do this with pencil? You can. Pencil's very similar, but you can't do quite as much. But it's basically the same process. It's just sometimes it's a little bit harder to sort of cover a broader area. Charcoal, I always think, is like a mixture between sort of it's a bit like using paint in that you can do some really broad marks, but you can also use like a thin line like you would with the pencil. It's just a question of just thinking of the hair as volume. I always start off faintly with those. I don't go too over the top to start off with, and then I can sort of tidy them up a little bit afterwards. One of the things that I find that's really useful about working with charcoal, and it's similar with pencil, is that if I'm not pleased with anything, if I think something doesn't work, the drawing does come out of me making lots and lots of corrections and not being too scared, or actually accepting the fact that I do have to constantly make mistakes.
Here are 2 more drawings by Frank of the same hairstyles when he had a little bit more time. Again guys, drawing hair well can absolutely transform your portraits and figure drawings, and this is also a great way to practice your skills with laying down simple values before details. I've uploaded the full-length demos if you'd like to draw along with them and get more detailed instruction at lovelifedrawing.com/hairdemo. And on our site you can also sign up for our newsletter and get our free guide, Life Drawing Success, which is all about the main mistake which leads to most other mistakes in life drawing. I think you'll like it. You can go to that hair demo page to sign up for it. And there are some more useful videos on the screen. I hope you enjoy them.